The battlefield of Karen looked dead from the sky. Smoke covered the ruined cities like dark clouds that never moved. Broken warships burned across the horizon, and the ground was filled with destroyed tanks, metal debris, and the bodies of forgotten soldiers. For 30 days, humans and aliens had fought without mercy on this planet. Now only silence remained. Captain Elias Varn walked slowly through the ruins with a rifle hanging weakly in his hands. His armor was damaged, his face covered in dirt, and one side of his helmet was cracked from an explosion 2 days earlier. He looked tired, not just physically tired, the kind of tired that lived deep inside a person after seeing too much death. Every member of his squad was gone. Some died during the final battle. Others disappeared during the retreat. Now Elias was alone. A cold wind moved through the destroyed streets, carrying ash through the air like gray snow. Far away, giant pieces of burning ships still fell from the sky, crashing into the dead city with heavy explosions. Elias stopped beside an abandoned military vehicle and checked his food pack again. Only one ration remained, one small emergency meal. That was all he had left until rescue arrived, maybe 2 more days, maybe longer. He closed the bag slowly, trying not to think about hunger. Then he heard it, a strange sound, very soft, very weak. At first Elias thought it was only the wind moving through broken metal. But then he heard it again, a child crying. Elias immediately raised his rifle and looked around carefully. The streets were empty, no movement, no soldiers, no civilians, only ruins, smoke, and silence. The crying came again, this time from somewhere beneath a destroyed alien transport ship lying on its side near the road. Elias frowned. It made no sense. No civilians were supposed to be here, especially not children. He slowly moved closer, stepping carefully over broken metal and shattered glass. The closer he got, the weaker the crying became, almost like whoever made this sound no longer had strength left. Elias stopped beside the crashed transport and looked underneath. At first he saw only darkness. Then 2 glowing golden eyes opened inside the shadows. Elias instantly aimed his rifle, his finger tightening near the trigger. The small figure quickly moved backward in fear, pressing against the metal wall behind it. It was an alien child. She looked no older than 6 or 7 years old by human standards. Her skin had pale silver markings across her arms, and small glowing lines moved weakly across her face like fading light. She was thin, dangerously thin. Her breathing looked weak and painful. The child stared at Elias with pure terror. She thought he was going to kill her. For a long moment neither of them moved. Elias remembered the war instantly. Burning cities on Earth, human soldiers screaming during alien attacks, entire colonies destroyed in minutes. These aliens were the enemy. His hand tightened harder around the rifle. The child noticed. She curled into the corner and covered her face with shaking hands, waiting for death. But Elias did not fire. Something felt wrong. This was not a soldier, not a monster, not a threat. Just a starving child hiding alone in the ruins of a dead world. The little girl slowly lowered her hands and looked at him again. Her glowing eyes were wet with tears. Then Elias noticed something else. The child kept staring at the food bag attached to his armor. Not the weapon, not the uniform, the food. She was starving. Elias looked down silently. That small ration pack was his last meal. Without it, surviving until rescue would become much harder. For several seconds he said nothing. The cold wind howled through the broken streets around them. Then slowly, Elias removed the ration pack from his belt. The child's eyes widened in confusion. Elias carefully placed the food on the ground and stepped backward, showing her he would not hurt her. For a moment the alien child did not move, like she could not believe what she was seeing. Then finally she crawled forward carefully and grabbed the ration with shaking hands. She opened it desperately and started eating faster than Elias had ever seen. The soldier watched silently. The child looked terrified even while eating, almost like she expected someone to steal the food away at any second. Then suddenly she stopped. Slowly, she looked up at Elias again. Her voice was weak and broken when she spoke. "Human, why?" Elias opened his mouth to answer, but before he could speak, something massive appeared above the clouds. A loud mechanical sound shook the sky. Elias looked upward instantly, his expression turning cold. Dark warships were descending through the smoke, their giant searchlights moving across the ruined city below. The alien child saw the ships and immediately backed away in fear. But what shocked Elias most was not the ships themselves. It was the symbols painted across their sides. These were not military rescue ships. They were hunter ships, and they were searching for something. Something important enough to return to a dead planet after the war had already ended. Slowly, Elias looked back at the frightened child hiding beneath the wreckage. Then the terrible truth entered his mind. They were searching for her. The hunter ships moved slowly across the dark sky. Their giant searchlights cut through the smoke-covered ruins of HFY like glowing knives. Every few seconds, the deep sound of scanning machines echoed across the dead city, making the broken buildings shake slightly. Captain Elias Varn stayed perfectly still beside the crashed transport ship. His eyes followed the ships carefully while one thought repeated inside his mind again and again. They came back for the child, not for survivors, not for soldiers, for her. Under the wreckage, the small alien girl pressed herself deeper into the shadows, trembling with fear. The weak glowing lines on her skin flickered faster now, almost like her body reacted to the ships above. Elias noticed it immediately whenever the ships moved closer. The strange lights on her arms became brighter. The child looked up at him with terrified golden eyes. Then she whispered something softly in her own alien language. Elias could not understand the words, but he understood fear when he heard it. A loud mechanical sound suddenly echoed from above. "Sector scan beginning." The voice came from the hunter ships, cold and emotionless. "Life signs detected will be terminated immediately." Elias cursed quietly under his breath. These were not rescue teams. This was an execution mission. Without wasting another second, he crouched beside the child and spoke in a calm voice. "If you want to live, you stay close to me." The little girl stared at him silently, unsure if she could trust him. Then another loud scanning pulse moved across the area, lighting the street in blue light. The child immediately grabbed Elias's arm tightly in fear. That was enough for him. Elias quickly pulled away broken metal pieces blocking the backside of the crashed transport, revealing a narrow underground maintenance tunnel hidden beneath the ruins. "Move," he whispered. The child crawled after him without hesitation this time. The tunnel was dark, cold, and filled with dust. Small emergency lights blinked weakly along the walls, barely showing the path ahead. Far above them, heavy ship engines continued roaring through the sky. Elias moved carefully through the narrow passage while keeping his rifle ready. The alien child followed only a few steps behind him, staying so close that sometimes she almost stepped on his boots. After several minutes, they finally reached an old underground storage room. The place looked abandoned for years. Broken supply crates covered the floor, and rusty pipes leaked water from the ceiling. For now it was safe. Elias closed the heavy metal door quietly and finally allowed himself to breathe again. The child remained near the corner of the room, watching him carefully like a frightened animal. Elias removed his damaged helmet and sat against the wall tiredly. For the first time in days, silence returned. Then he noticed the child staring at him again, more specifically, staring at his empty food bag. Elias gave a small, tired smile. "That was my last meal, you know," he said quietly. The child tilted her head slightly, not understanding all the words. Then very slowly, she pointed at herself. "Lyra," she whispered. Elias looked at her for a moment before nodding once. "Lyra," he repeated. The little girl seemed surprised hearing her name spoken by a human. Then, slowly, she pointed at him, waiting. "Elias," he answered, for the first time since meeting her. The child looked slightly less afraid, but the peaceful moment did not last long. Suddenly, Elias's military radio crackled with static beside him. At first he ignored it, thinking it was only signal interference. Then a voice came through clearly. "Priority alert to all remaining units." Elias immediately grabbed the radio, lowering the volume. "The target child must be found immediately," the voice continued. "Repeat, the child is not to leave the planet alive." Elias froze. Even Lyra seemed to understand something was wrong after seeing his face. The radio continued. All soldiers are authorized for full termination protocols. Extreme caution advised. Target displays unstable biological abnormalities. Then the message ended, leaving only static behind. For several long seconds, the underground room stayed silent. Elias slowly lowered the radio, his expression dark and confused. Biological abnormalities. What exactly was this child? He looked toward Lyra again. The little girl had curled up quietly near the wall, hugging her knees against her chest. She looked exhausted, frightened, and completely harmless. Not some dangerous weapon. Then suddenly Elias noticed blood dripping slowly from his left hand. During the escape through the wreckage, a sharp piece of metal had cut deeply into his palm. The wound looked bad now. Lyra saw it too, without saying anything. The child slowly stood and walked toward him carefully. Elias stayed still, unsure what she was doing. Then Lyra gently placed her small glowing hand over the wound. At first nothing happened. Then the silver lines across her skin suddenly lit up brightly. Warm light spread across Elias's injured hand. He felt no pain. His eyes widened instantly. Slowly, Lyra removed her hand. The deep cut was completely gone, not healing gone. Elias stared at his hand in disbelief while the child looked down nervously, like she expected him to fear her now. But before Elias could speak, every emergency light inside the underground room suddenly turned red. A loud warning alarm echoed through the tunnel system. Then a cold mechanical voice spoke across the darkness. Target located beneath Sector 9. Elias's blood turned cold. They found them. The red emergency lights inside the underground room kept flashing like a warning heartbeat. Every pulse of light made the shadows jump across the broken walls, turning the safe place into something that felt like a trap. Captain Elias Varn immediately moved in front of Lyra, placing his body between her and the tunnel entrance. His rifle was raised, but his mind was racing faster than his weapon could react. "They found us," he whispered under his breath. From deep inside the tunnels, heavy footsteps began to echo, not human footsteps. Too heavy, too synchronized, metal boots moving in perfect rhythm, getting closer every second. Lyra stepped back slowly, her glowing skin flickering again, reacting to the danger. Elias noticed her breathing getting faster, but something was wrong. The enemy was not just searching randomly. They were tracking her exactly, like they already knew where she was. A loud mechanical voice echoed through the underground system again. "Containment unit approaching target zone." Elias tightened his grip on the rifle. Containment, not capture, not rescue. Containment meant control, or destruction if needed. He looked at Lyra quickly. "Stay behind me," he said firmly. The child did not argue this time. The tunnel entrance suddenly exploded open as armored soldiers dropped inside. But these were not normal soldiers. Their bodies were covered in black reinforced armor, their faces hidden behind smooth helmets with no expressions, no names, no identity. Only weapons. The leader stepped forward and spoke through a distorted voice system. "Human soldier Elias Varn, step away from the target." Elias did not move. Behind him, Lyra held onto his jacket tightly. The soldier continued, "You are interfering with a classified extinction-level operation." Elias narrowed his eyes. "Extinction?" he repeated quietly. The soldier raised his weapon slightly. "The subject is not a child," the voice said. "It is a biological anomaly created for war evolution testing." Lyra flinched at the word anomaly, even though she did not fully understand it. Elias felt something shift inside him. He had seen war, he had seen enemies, but never a child being spoken about like garbage. He slowly stepped forward, lowering his rifle slightly. "She is alive," Elias said firmly. The soldier tilted his head slightly. "Incorrect," he replied. The moment after those words, everything changed. The soldiers raised their weapons at once. Elias acted instantly, firing the first shot and diving to the side. The underground room erupted into chaos. Energy blasts hit the walls. Metal exploded into sparks, and the tunnels filled with smoke. Lyra screamed as Elias grabbed her and pulled her behind a broken supply crate. "Don't move," he shouted. Outside, more armored units were entering the tunnel, surrounding them from all sides. Elias realized quickly, This was not a rescue mission. This was a cleanup operation, and Lyra was the target. Suddenly, the soldier leader spoke again through the chaos. "Terminate the human if he resists." A blast hit near Elias, throwing him against the wall. Pain shot through his body, but he forced himself up again. Lyra crawled toward him in panic, but before she could reach him, another soldier aimed directly at her. Time slowed for Elias in that moment. He saw the weapon charging. He saw Lyra frozen in fear. He saw everything about to end. Then something inside him snapped. "No!" He shouted. He jumped forward without thinking, blocking Lyra completely with his body. The energy blast hit him directly in the side. The impact threw him across the room, crashing into the wall hard enough to crack it. Silence fell for half a second. Lyra stared in horror. For the first time, something inside her reacted violently. Her glowing lines turned bright silver instantly. The air in the room shifted, like gravity itself changed. The soldiers paused, confused by sudden energy spikes. Lyra slowly stood up, shaking. Her eyes were no longer just frightened. They were waking up. A deep pulse of light spread from her body, hitting every surface in the room. Metal bent slightly. Lights flickered, and the air became heavy. The soldiers tried to aim, but their weapons suddenly malfunctioned. One by one, systems shut down. Elias lifted his head weakly, seeing Lyra standing in the center of the light. "Lyra," he whispered, but the child did not respond like before. Something was changing inside her. The soldier leader stepped back for the first time. "What is this?" he muttered. Lyra raised her small hand slowly, still trembling, and the entire underground system went silent. No alarms, no weapons, no movement. Everything stopped. Even the soldiers froze as if time itself was holding its breath. Lyra looked at Elias lying injured on the ground, and for the first time, her voice came out clearly in broken human language. "Don't hurt him." Then the lights exploded outward in a wave of silence. The underground tunnel was no longer a battlefield. It was frozen in an unnatural silence. Broken lights hung from the ceiling without blinking. Smoke stayed still in the air, and even falling dust seemed to pause mid-air, like time itself had been forced to stop. Captain Elias Varn lay against the cracked wall, struggling to breathe, his body still burning from the energy blast he took for Lyra. Every breath felt heavy, but his eyes stayed open, fixed on the child in front of him. Lyra stood in the center of the tunnel, small and shaking, but something about her had changed completely. The glowing silver lines on her skin were no longer weak or unstable. They moved like flowing energy, controlled but dangerous. The soldiers who had entered the tunnel were no longer moving. They stood frozen in place, weapons still raised, but their bodies locked as if the world had forgotten how to continue. Lyra slowly looked at them, confused and scared by her own power. She did not understand what she had done. All she knew was that something inside her had reacted when Elias got hurt, and now everything was silent because of it. Elias tried to lift his hand slightly. "Lyra," he whispered weakly, hearing his voice. The child quickly turned toward him. For a moment, the glowing energy around her flickered. Like her emotions were unstable again, she ran toward him and knelt beside him immediately. "Elias," she repeated, her voice trembling. He forced a weak smile. "I'm still here," he said quietly. But Lyra's eyes were filled with fear, not fear of enemies, fear of herself. Outside the tunnel, deep mechanical sounds echoed again. More units were arriving, but they were stopping at the edge of the frozen zone, unable to enter. The energy field around Lyra was expanding slowly, like a barrier between her and the outside world. Then suddenly, a new voice came through the tunnel speakers, calm, controlled, and far more intelligent than the soldiers before. "Subject Lyra has entered activation state." Elias's eyes narrowed. This was not a field commander. This voice was coming from a central intelligence system. The voice continued, "All containment units, stand down perimeter aggression." The frozen soldiers outside the tunnel began to lower their weapons slightly, but they still could not move fully. Then the voice spoke again. "Human interference detected." There was a short pause. "Captain Elias Varn, you have committed high-level interference in classified genetic containment operation. Elias tried to sit up, but pain forced him back down. He gritted his teeth, listening carefully. The voice continued, "Explain your actions." Elias looked at Lyra, then at the frozen soldiers, then back at the darkness around them. He knew there was no negotiation here, so he answered simply, "She is a child." A long silence followed. Then the voice responded, "Incorrect classification." Lyra flinched at those words. Even though she did not fully understand them, she felt their meaning. Elias tightened his fist. "You're talking about her like she's a weapon," he said angrily. The voice remained calm. "She is not a weapon," it replied. "She is the foundation of a future evolution protocol." Elias looked at Lyra again. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were filled with confusion and pain. She had saved him without meaning to, and now the entire galaxy seemed to fear her for it. Then something unexpected happened. Lyra slowly placed her hand on Elias's chest. The same glowing light spread again, but this time it was gentle, not violent. Elias felt the pain in his body slowly fading. The broken ribs, the burns, even the internal damage, all began to ease. His breathing steadied. The voice outside paused, then changed tone slightly. "Containment anomaly detected." Lyra looked up at Elias. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she whispered. Elias placed his hand over hers weakly. "You didn't," he said. The energy field around them flickered again, reacting to their connection. Then suddenly, the frozen soldiers outside the tunnel began to move again, slowly at first, then fully. But something had changed. They were no longer aiming at Lyra immediately. They hesitated. That hesitation was enough for Elias. He grabbed a broken metal rod beside him and stood up despite the pain. "Lyra, stay behind me," he said firmly again. But this time Lyra did not listen. She stepped forward instead and faced the soldiers directly. The glowing energy around her intensified again. But her voice was different now. Not scared, not confused, but quiet and clear. "Stop," she said softly. The entire tunnel system responded instantly. Weapons shut down again, lights dimmed, and the soldiers froze in place once more. Even the central voice became silent for a moment. Lyra turned back to Elias slowly. "I don't understand what I am," she said. Elias looked at her carefully, then answered in a tired but honest voice, "You're someone I refuse to leave behind." For the first time, Lyra's eyes softened, but deep above them, far beyond the tunnels and frozen battlefield, something massive began to move in orbit. A fleet much larger than anything seen before. And its arrival message was already being broadcast across every channel. Primary subject confirmed. Prepare planetary reset sequence. The sky above Charon 9 was no longer just dark, it was alive again. Massive alien warships filled the orbit like a second sky, their engines glowing red and blue as they slowly formed a perfect circle around the planet. Each ship was larger than a city, and together they blocked out what little light remained from the dying sun. Inside the underground tunnel, Captain Elias Varn stood beside Lyra, listening to the distant vibrations shaking through the ground. This was not a small unit anymore. This was an invasion fleet. But something felt different this time. They were not attacking immediately. They were waiting. A cold voice echoed again through broken communication systems left alive across the planet. Subject Lyra confirmed in awakening state. "Prepare for extraction protocol." Elias looked at Lyra sharply. "They don't want to kill you anymore," he said slowly. "They want to take you." Lyra stepped closer to him instinctively, holding onto his arm. "I don't want to go," she whispered. Elias didn't answer right away. He was thinking, analyzing, trying to understand what was happening. Because no ordinary child caused an entire fleet to arrive, and no ordinary weapon reacted emotionally like she did. Then suddenly, the tunnel lights flickered again. A new signal was being forced through all systems. This time, the voice was not mechanical. It was older, more controlled, almost human-like. "Lyra of Lineage 9, the voice said. Elias frowned. Lineage 9. The words meant something important, something hidden. The voice continued. "You are the last remaining core of the origin design." Lyra's grip on Elias tightened immediately. "I don't understand," she said softly. Elias stepped forward slightly, speaking into the broken speaker system. Who are you? He demanded. A pause followed. Then the answer came. We are your creators. Silence fell instantly. Even the distant war outside seemed to fade for a moment. Elias looked at Lyra in disbelief. Creators. That meant she wasn't just an experiment. She was something designed from the beginning. But before he could speak again, Lyra suddenly stepped back, her body trembling. The glowing energy around her became unstable again. No, she whispered. I don't want creators. The tunnel walls began to shake slightly, reacting to her emotional state. Above them, ships adjusted their positions immediately. The voice returned quickly. Stability warning. Subject emotional overload detected. Containment must begin immediately. Elias realized what was happening. Her emotions were directly linked to reality around her. Not just healing, not just energy, but full environmental control at a subconscious level. That meant fear could destroy worlds, and pain could erase armies. He turned toward her quickly. Lyra, look at me, he said firmly. She hesitated, then looked at him. You are not their weapon, Elias said. You are not their creation. You are here with me. For a moment, the glowing energy around her slowed, stabilizing slightly. But the voice above responded immediately. Human influence detected. Interference increasing instability. Then something unexpected happened. A massive beam of light descended from one of the orbiting ships, striking the ground far away from the tunnel. The entire planet shook. Elias almost lost balance. What was that? He muttered. The voice answered coldly. Demonstration of containment capability. Lyra stepped back in fear again. Her eyes widened as distant cities began to vanish one by one under controlled energy strikes. Not explosions, not destruction, erasure. Entire regions were being wiped clean, as if they never existed. Elias clenched his fists in anger. This is not control, he said. This is genocide. The voice did not respond to the emotion. Only logic. Non-compliance results in planetary reset. Lyra suddenly dropped to her knees, covering her ears. I don't want this, she cried. I didn't ask for this. The energy around her burst again. Stronger than before, the tunnel collapsed slightly, cracks spreading across the ceiling. Elias rushed forward and grabbed her shoulders. Lyra, stop! He shouted, but she was overwhelmed. Power was reacting to emotion again, spiraling out of control. Then something changed. Elias did the only thing he could think of. He pulled her into a tight embrace and held her. No weapons, no commands, no fear, just silence. Lyra froze in his arms. The energy stopped spreading. Slowly, the glowing light around her began to calm. Above them, the voice detected the shift. Stability regained. But incomplete, Elias spoke softly into the silence. You don't belong to them, he said. You never did. Lyra looked up at him with teary. The silence after the command did not last long. It was not peace. It was the calm before total collapse. Above Charon 9, the massive fleet began to shift formation. Each ship rotating slowly into a precise geometric pattern that covered the entire planet like a cage of light. Inside the underground tunnel, Captain Elias Varn still held Lyra close. But now even he could feel the change in the air. Something final was coming. Lyra was no longer shaking. But she was not calm either. Her glowing silver lines pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat trying to match something far bigger than her body. Elias looked up at the cracked ceiling. Whatever they are planning, he said quietly, it's starting. A deep sound echoed through the planet, not from the ground, but from the sky itself. All at once, every system, every communication channel, and every remaining military base activated at the same time. The voice returned. But now it was not just one speaker. It was an entire network speaking as one. Final protocol initiated. Subject Lyra will be reset or removed. Elias tightened his grip on Lyra's shoulder. You hear that? He said, they don't see you as alive. They see you as something to erase. Lyra looked up slowly. I didn't choose this, she whispered. Elias nodded. I know. Above them, the first strike began. A thin beam of light dropped from orbit and hit the surface far away. But this time it was different. There was no explosion, no fire, The land simply disappeared, like reality had been cut away. Entire buildings, forests, and mountains vanished in seconds, leaving empty space behind. Lyra saw it through the tunnel opening and froze. "That's everywhere?" she asked. Elias did not answer, because he knew the truth now. Yes, it was everywhere. The fleet was not attacking. It was erasing the planet piece by piece, slowly controlling what would remain and what would not. A controlled ending, a reset. Lyra suddenly stepped away from Elias, her breathing becoming uneven again. "No," she said, shaking her head. "No, I don't want them to do that." The glowing energy around her began to rise again, faster this time. Elias stepped forward quickly. "Lyra, stop," he warned. But she was staring at the destruction outside, at cities vanishing silently, at life being removed without sound. "I can stop it," she whispered suddenly. Elias froze. "What?" Lyra looked at her hands, trembling. "I can feel them," she said. "I can feel everything they are doing, above them." The fleet reacted immediately. Subject synchronization increasing. Containment instability rising. Accelerate termination phase. Another beam fired, closer this time, shaking the entire tunnel system. Rocks fell from the ceiling, and the underground room started collapsing in sections. Elias grabbed Lyra again, pulling her back. "No, listen to me," he said firmly. "You don't fight them like this. You'll destroy everything, including yourself." But Lyra's eyes were no longer just afraid. There was something else now. Anger, not violent anger, but pain turning into power. "They are hurting everything," she said softly. "They are hurting you." Elias saw it then. Her power was not random. It reacted directly to emotion. And right now, emotion was breaking her control. Suddenly, Lyra stepped forward out of his grip. The energy around her exploded outward, shaking the entire underground structure. For a moment, the tunnel lights died completely. Then everything went still again. But the stillness was different. Even Elias felt it. Like gravity had changed slightly, above ground, entire sections of the fleet suddenly stopped moving. Systems flickered, weapons failed, and communication lines went silent for a brief moment. The alien command network reacted instantly. Unknown interference detected. Subject has entered full awakening state. Lyra was now standing alone in the center of the collapsing tunnel, her body glowing brighter than before, but her expression was no longer confusion. It was clarity mixed with sorrow. "I don't want to destroy," she said softly, "but I can't let them erase everything." Elias struggled to stand. "Lyra," he said weakly, but she did not turn back this time. Above them, the fleet prepared its final sequence. A massive orbital device began charging, far larger than anything used before. The voice spoke one last time. "Final reset beam ready. Targeting planetary core consciousness." Elias realized what that meant. They were not just erasing the planet. They were aiming for Lyra herself, the source of everything happening. He stepped forward despite his injuries. "No," he shouted. The sky above Karen 9 turned completely white. Not bright like sunlight, but empty, like reality itself was being erased from existence. The final reset beam from the orbital fleet was descending slowly now. Not like a weapon, but like a judgment that could not be stopped. Inside the collapsing underground tunnel, Captain Elias Varn struggled to stand, his body broken, his breathing heavy. But his eyes never left Lyra. She stood at the center of the shaking ruins, glowing brighter than anything Elias had ever seen. But now her expression was calm, almost peaceful. Not fear, not anger, just understanding. The beam above them widened, covering the entire region. Systems across the planet began shutting down one by one. Cities disappearing silently. Oceans destabilizing. Mountains breaking apart into nothing. This was not war anymore. It was deletion. Lyra slowly turned her head toward Elias. For the first time she smiled faintly. A small, broken smile, like a child trying to understand something too big for her heart. "I can hear them all now," she said softly. Elias took one step forward, ignoring the pain. "Lyra, don't listen to them," he said urgently. "They're trying to erase you." But Lyra shook her head gently. "No," she replied. They're afraid of me." A deep silence fell for a moment. Even the beam seemed to pause slightly, like the entire system was waiting for her next action. Lyra looked at her glowing hands again, then at Elias. "You didn't leave me," she said. "That was the first choice anyone ever made for me." Elias clenched his fists. "You are not a weapon," he said firmly. "You are not their experiment. You are here." Lyra's eyes softened even more. Then she looked up at the burning sky. "I don't want to be anything they created," she whispered. Above them, the fleet detected final stabilization failure. Subject emotional synchronization complete. Final override engaged. The beam began to descend faster. Elias rushed forward and grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her toward him. "If you go, I go with you," he said without hesitation. Lyra looked at him in shock. "Why?" she asked quietly. Elias smiled weakly. "Because I already decided," he said. The beam was now only seconds away, turning the entire sky into pure white destruction. Lyra closed her eyes, and for a moment, everything became completely silent. Then she did something unexpected. She did not fight the beam. She did not attack the fleet instead. She placed her hand over Elias's and whispered, "Then, stay." The energy exploded outward, but not in destruction. It spread like a wave across the planet, not breaking things, but stopping them. The descending beam froze mid-air, suspended like a broken chain of light. The fleet above began to malfunction instantly. Systems locking, engines failing, entire ships stopping in orbit as if time had been rewritten. The voice returned, but now it was unstable, fragmented. "Impossible, subject override, unknown, emotional field. Rewriting command structure." Elias looked up in shock. "What did you just do?" he whispered. Lyra opened her eyes slowly. "I didn't destroy it," she said. "I changed what it meant." Above them, the massive fleet began to drift apart, no longer in formation, no longer coordinated. Weapons powered down automatically, shields collapsed, and entire ships began shutting off as if refusing to continue the order they were given. The system was no longer obeying commands, because the commands no longer made sense. Lyra was not controlling them with force. She was rewriting intent itself. Elias stepped back slightly, stunned. "You stopped them." "Without killing them," he said quietly. Lyra nodded slowly. "I felt what they felt," she said. "They were afraid. Not of me, but of losing control." A long silence followed. Then, one by one, the orbital ships began to retreat, breaking formation and pulling away from the planet. Not destroyed, not defeated, just stopping. The voice came one final time, but it was no longer cold. It sounded uncertain, almost human. "Subject Lyra. Status unknown. Threat level undefined." Then silence, complete silence. The sky slowly returned from white back to dark. For the first time in a long time, Karenine was no longer under judgment. Elias collapsed to his knees, exhausted, but still holding Lyra's hand. "You saved them," he said softly. Lyra looked at him, confused. "I don't think I saved anyone," she replied. I think I stopped something from ending." Elias smiled faintly. "That's the same thing." Far above them, the fleet was gone, retreating into deep space without explanation, leaving behind a broken but living world,